Hello, everybody. How are we doing? Well, this is a bit of an impromptu stream, isn't it? I was not expecting this. I was not expecting anything this big to happen over the course of this winter break, if I'm honest with you. You know, you look at the drivers market, you look at the fact that we haven't had any big driver changes since Nick de Vries, and that was before the summer break. I was expecting this winter break to be smooth sailing for everyone involved and all the Formula One teams to just have a few months off. But Haas, of course it is Haas. Haas always deliver us a good chunk of Formula One news. It's generally bad, but my goodness me, what is going on? What is actually going on? So MoneyGram Haas have appointed Komatsu as their team principal to replace Gunther Steiner after Gunther Steiner has left the team. And the reason I can't really get my head around this is because Gunther Steiner effectively is Haas. Like, if Haas ever left, like if Gene Haas ever left the team, the next person that you would name the team after is Gunther Steiner. It was effectively Gunther Steiner F1 team. Was the only way that I can really describe how Haas has been run and how it's been done. And he has been there since the beginning. But let's try and look into this together and break down what is actually happening, because it is just chaos to me. I have not read anything as of yet. I literally got home from work at 5:30, the normal day, jumping straight in. I have not read anything. Let's take a little look. So, as you can see, MoneyGram Haas Formula One team have already appointed a brand new person to replace Gunther Steiner. He has been with the team for a little while. He's kind of been the number 2 to Gunther Steiner since Haas inception, since 2016, and has over 20 years of Formula One experience. I'm not necessarily thinking that this is a bad choice. I think he is a good choice for the Formula One team in the fact that they needed a quick replacement for Gunther Steiner. How well he will adapt to the role, we will have to wait and see. He was the director of engineering beforehand. It literally says director of engineering beforehand. And has been with the team since it started in 2016. So I can understand why they have gone for him, what's happening, but I just don't really understand why Gene has made this decision or why Gunther has decided to leave the team. So I feel like we have to delve into it. This is from the Haas Formula One team website. So we're not going to get too much real gritty information from this. It's not like, you know, the Haas Formula One team website is going to put out a statement by Gunther Steiner that was said in a meeting behind the scenes or anything like that. But at the same time, they'll give us a little bit of insight, hopefully. So they are thanking Gunther Steiner for all of his past work in the past decade with the team. Of course, we think about Haas joining the grid in 2016, but Gunther Steiner also put in all of the legwork for that. If any of you have read Gunther Steiner's book, I would very much recommend it. He talks about the kind of inception of Haas and how Haas have come to be this Formula One team that we now know. And a lot of that groundwork and a lot of the behind the scenes work, and even the fact getting Gene Haas to get involved, was all Gunther Steiner. So moving forward as an organization, it's clear we need to improve our on-track performances, and they are thinking that changing that management and having that engineering at heart of our management will maybe take the steps forward. And I kind of agree with this. I feel like Gunther Steiner is the perfect team principal in the sense that he has the charisma and the understanding of Formula One behind the scenes to really step forward into that role. It's a little bit like Toto Wolff, Christian Horner, who are probably the 2 most sought after team principals on the grid. And you think of, if we look at the last 15 years of Formula One, the most successful, and those 2 kind of have that same feeling to me. Toto Wolff does not know the ins and outs of a Formula One car, but Toto Wolff is the perfect man to get an entire team of people all pointing in the same direction. And Gunther Steiner, for me, is nearer to that than, say, what Komatsu is going to be, in that he is going to have a lot of understanding of the fundamentals of the engineering side of the Formula One team. Not to say that Gunther Steiner didn't. I know that Gunther Steiner worked in Formula One for a very long time. He was at Jaguar beforehand. He was very, very good friends with everyone. He worked at Red Bull. He then also worked alongside when Mercedes were coming into Formula One for the first time. He was in and around that pool of people that worked on that as well. So he does know the ins and outs of Formula One. But as I'm saying, that kind of technical side of things, I do understand maybe why Haas would have made this decision. Haas continued to say, we've made some success. Constant delivering of results help us to reach wider goals as an organization. Of course, they talk about efficient resources, design and engineering capabilities as our successful Formula One team. They're not going to point fingers at Gunther Steiner and say, you did us wrong or you did too bad as a Formula One race team principal. It's naturally we're very excited to take the opportunity. MoneyGram, newly appointed team principal to MoneyGram Formula One team, having been with the team since its track debut back in 2016. That's very true. He knows the ins and outs of the team. I understand. Okay, so generally speaking, from this kind of Haas statement, we get Komatsu's side of things. We get Haas's decision to put Komatsu in. But yes, I want to know, why is he leaving? Exactly. That's exactly what I also want to know, Yasin. And unfortunately, Haas have not given us that information. Let's head over to the Formula One website. Let's head over to the Formula One website and see if we can get any more here. So Gunther Steiner leaves role at Haas Formula One team with immediate effect. Gunther Steiner, team principal of Haas Formula One team, has been replaced. Obviously, we've just touched upon that. Gunther Steiner has led the team, the American squad, since 2015. However, last year, with a tough year, Haas finished last in the Constructors' Championship, of course. They finished last after dropping 2 places at the end of the season. We've got to remember, they started the season really well. Again, it was one of those things that, I don't know, Haas always seemed to start the season a little bit better and then tail off towards the end. And again, that was the case in 2023. I would say even more so in 2022, that was the case as well. Although, let's zoom in a touch for you, because I can see that's actually quite small. There you go. After a discussion between Steiner and owner Gene Haas over the winter, it's decided that Steiner would leave the organization with immediate effect. Okay. Over 20 years experience in Formula One engineering. Owner Gene Haas said, I'd like to start by extending my thanks to Gunther. Oh, this is just the same thing. Okay, so we're not going to get any real insight, it feels like, into why Gunther Steiner may have left. So let's throw it over to you guys then, because this whole channel is a discussion. And I want to know what your thoughts and feelings are. Why would you, if you were Gunther Steiner, leave the Haas project? So you've got to remember, from Gunther Steiner's point of view, he has effectively made this Formula One team. It is basically Gunther Steiner's Formula One team. He has been as close to the project as he could possibly be. He has driven them to all of the ups, also driven them to all of the downs they have had in Formula One. But I don't know if Gunther Steiner would have been the person to enact this. If I'm Gunther Steiner, he is so heavily invested in Haas Formula One. I can't see a world where Gunther Steiner was the man who pulled the trigger on this. I can't see a world where Gunther Steiner was the deciding factor between whether or not he got to stay at Haas Formula One. I just feel like it will have been Gene's decision. That's just my thoughts and feelings on it. I feel like if I was Gene Haas, I'd be looking at the performances since 2016. I'd be looking at the fact that Haas got off to an absolute flyer, we have to remember. So actually, let's take a look at the results here. Constructor standings. If we go back to 2016, 2017 and have a little look at the constructor standings, is this going to just be like a absolutely terrible thing to try and look at? There we go. If we go back to 2016, Haas come into Formula One. Their first season in Formula One, they are clear in 8th place. Like, clear by a nice margin in 8th place. Nowhere near the Renault, Saubers, or Mercedes of this world, MRT Mercedes of this world, should say, not Mercedes. Mercedes at the top. But yeah, Haas themselves start 8th place. 2017, they then stay in 8th place. They then drop. No, sorry. 2018 was incredible. So 2018 was when they get their 5th place. And you can see how Gene has come in. He's had this idea for a Formula One team. He's got, Gunther has come in, had this idea for a Formula One team. He's got Gene behind him. And Gene is starting to see the positive trajectory of the Haas Formula One team, right? He's starting to see, okay, 2016, we were comfortable in terms of our standings finish. Then 17, we looked to build on that. We didn't finish any higher in the standings necessarily, but we had another season under our belts and we understood what was moving forwards. And then 2018 comes around. They're 5th place. They jump up a considerable chunk. You look at the names that are behind them. McLaren are behind them. Force India are behind them. Sauber are behind them. These are teams that have been on the Formula One grid for an insane amount of time. These are teams that, considering Haas is in their 3rd year, they are beating out McLaren in the Formula One standings. That is where Gene Haas sees this team initially going. The problem is they get to 2019, it starts to have a little wobble. And this is where, you can start to talk about the problem with the sponsorships. You can talk about Rich Energy and the fact that the Rich Energy company came in. They wanted to change things around. You then also have the problem with the team starting to develop a little bit more, the understanding of the regulations, and the fact that, Haas haven't gone a full regulation cycle as of yet. Whereas, as I said, the teams beforehand, McLaren have gone through numerous regulation cycles. They have understood hundreds and hundreds of different ways of manufacturing various different Formula One cars over the years. Whereas Haas are very much in their inception. 2019 starts to go wrong. 2020, again, They finish in 9th place, but you can see they are so far adrift. And so are Alfa Romeo, so are Williams at this point. But I just think this is where maybe, the 2019, 2020, especially 2021, I think Haas Formula One had one of the worst seasons I can remember. Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher were awful between them. They didn't really deliver too much behind the wheel, but that Formula One car was exceptionally bad. And the thing was, Guenther Steiner effectively promised the Haas team, don't worry, what we're going to do is, instead of trying in the 2021 season, we're going to take the money that we can get from 2 rookies coming in that have a massive amount of cash behind them. Nikita Mazepin brought in the Uralkali money. Mick Schumacher brings in all of that German money and ambassadorial stuff behind the Schumacher name. And then we're going to rebuild. We're going to have the 2021 season effectively off, so that we can get a head start in 2022. And I think Gene could have probably understood that. You know what I mean? So Gene has seen 2016, 2017, 2018, that trajectory upwards, in my opinion. It's then hit 2019. They had their first real issue. 2020 was, again, a little bit of a throwaway. And they've said, right, we've had 3 years of really good success, 2 years of bad success, but we need a year to turn it around. So I think what would have happened is Gunther Steiner would have convinced the team 2021 was a turnaround year. And in that sense, he then needed to deliver in 2022 and 2023. 2022, you could argue he delivered a little bit, but the problem was they only really delivered at the start of the season. if you look at where those 37 points came from for Haas, the majority of them came from Kevin Magnussen in the first 4 or 5 races. And that's because they just had a big head start on everybody else coming into these 2022 regulations, because they started and effectively had an entire year to work on it during 2021, where the other teams were also still trying to make their 2021 car a little bit better. Thank you, Formula Finesse, for just subscribing. So 2022, I feel like Gene would have seen that and been like, okay, we started well. We've maybe got a concept of a car that we can work with, but we couldn't quite develop it over the course of a season. 2023, they come into it. Again, if you look at where their points came from, Nico Hülkenberg comes in at the beginning of this season, does really well at the first 4-5 races. You know, I'm thinking of that drive in Australia that Nico Hülkenberg had that was very, very impressive. But again, it falls off a cliff in the way that they are not able to develop the car forwards. So if I'm Gene Haas, okay, and if you're Gene Haas, Gene has been put through this pace where he's seen what the team could have been. He's seen what the team was moving towards. He's seen the team finish in 5th place in the constructor standings in their 3rd season of Formula One, which just shows how quickly, if you get things right, you can move in Formula One. That's why we're so excited for Audi, right? The reason we are so excited for the Audi project is because we believe that the Audi team have the capability to move in that general positive direction, which is what we saw from Haas initially. Then Haas had 2 years where the finances fell apart. And Gene couldn't really foresee that. We then also couldn't foresee the fact that we were going to have the COVID season. Absolute breakdown in finances, and it's understandable that the Haas team then fell off a cliff. But having 2021 as a complete turnaround year where you can no longer blame the finances, because Gunther Steiner has come out himself and said that they had more than enough cash over the course of the 2021 season into 2022 because of Nikita Mazepin, because of Mick Schumacher, and that change that they made in terms of their philosophy to bring in those 2 drivers and get rid of Kevin Magnussen and Romain Grosjean, 2 drivers who had been on the Formula One grid for an incredibly long time at that point. They decided to then bring in that cash, and they needed to see something to move them in the right direction. But unfortunately, it's now come to 2023. They've had 2 years to work amongst this direction, right? They've had 2 years of the 2022 regulations. You could argue they've kind of had 3 years of the 2022 regulations in terms of in the factory, but they really haven't delivered. They really have not delivered in terms of what we were expecting from Haas moving forwards. And they were by far and away the slowest at the end of last season. And they just really fell apart, especially when you look at COTA. And everyone said that American Grand Prix is going to be that turning point. This is the biggest upgrade that the Haas team are ever going to bring in terms of, well, have brung in their entire history. It's the biggest upgrade they are bringing, and yet it wasn't good enough to surpass a Williams car that was not being upgraded, an Alfa Romeo team that is effectively, you know, at the end of its cycle. We knew that Alfa Romeo were leaving, so there's no money being put into the project from Alfa Romeo from their end, because why would they? They're leaving at the end of the year. And they couldn't surpass an AlphaTauri team that didn't bring the biggest upgrade they've ever had. They just brought a couple of floor upgrades, a little bit of aero work, and they were still much, much quicker than the Haas team. So I think what you're seeing is Gunther Steiner has hit this barrier, this wall, where I don't think he knew where to take the team moving forward. I don't think Gene Haas understood or could see the direction that they needed to go in under Gunther Steiner to get back to where they were and to kind of save themselves from this cycle. And I feel like that culmination of things means that if you're Gene Haas, you probably take that route out of this, right? You say, you know what, Gunther, you've had more than enough time during the 2022 regulations to get a concept of a car that we can build off of. Like, even if it is just copying the Red Bull, get that concept there. But he hasn't been able to do that. But let's see what you guys are saying. It's taken a few years off so he can join Audi. I would not be surprised, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, Andreas Stella has gone in the Audi direction. Not Andreas Stella. Andreas Seidel. Andreas Seidel has gone in the Audi direction from the McLaren team. It would not surprise me if Guenther Steiner was brought into the Audi setup in some way or another. Oh, thank you, mate. Thank you for the subscription. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being related to the Audi project in some way or another. Because obviously before Formula One, he did work in various other motorsports as well. You got to remember, Gunther Steiner has been around the block. He's one of those kind of old school motorsport guys. He has worked here, there, and everywhere in every single direction. Drives for Ferrari in 2026? I don't think so. I'm back for the first time since the MCL 60 car launch. Wow. Well, welcome back. Appreciate it. F1 is fucked. Yeah. Close to getting bored of the sport. He said only still exists because of the cost cap. That is fair enough. Yeah, Gene. Actually, so this is a question that I've also been having recently, in that I looked at the engine regulations for 2026. So in the kind of down season, I've taken a step back a little bit from obviously having to go live for all of the races and all the qualifying and all that kind of thing. And I've taken a little look at the 2026 engine regulations. And I thought it was very interesting that, and I'm going to get it up in front of me so I don't misspeak in any way. I was looking at the 2026 engine regulations and who is signed up to who currently. So at this moment in time, we have 6 different power units that are expected to be on the grid for the 2026 season. And considering we have 4 at the moment, that is a big jump. We're going to see 6 different power units. We're going to have the Red Bull powertrains, and Red Bull have obviously signed up themselves and whatever AlphaTauri ends up being called. Mercedes powertrains are still going to be there with Mercedes, McLaren, and Williams. Honda looks set to join Aston Martin. So Aston Martin are going to move over to Honda. Alpine are still going to be Renault. Audi are going to bring their own engine to the Sauber team. So Sauber are still going to be doing the bodywork and the aerodynamics, but Audi are going to be bringing in their own engine to that project. And Ferrari, I was looking at, okay, so Ferrari, surely it's still Ferrari and Haas. But Haas have not signed an engine deal for the 2026 season. Ferrari is still going to be manufacturing Ferrari engines. Haas have not said whether or not they're going to partner with Ferrari for 2026. They are still partnered with Ferrari up until 2026, but no further. So it does make me wonder, the Andretti project, and I know it's an obvious line to draw because American owner in Gene Haas sells to American owner in Mario Andretti. But because they haven't signed up for an engine manufacturer yet for 2026, and we know that General Motors and Andretti want to get involved in the sport from 2028, I think Formula One have received an offer and are starting to look into the availability of Andretti being an engine manufacturer, at least, even if they're not a Formula One team by that point, being an engine manufacturer for 2028. Do they maybe try and move that forward a couple of years? And do we actually end up with a 7th power unit on the grid in the form of Haas Andretti, in that we're going to have a Haas Formula One team that is powered by an Andretti power unit for the 2026 season onwards? That's just my kind of tinfoil hat on, little bit of, why have Haas not signed up for a 2026 power unit yet? Because that is a cornerstone of the Formula One car. I made a short recently about the power unit in a Formula One car and the fact that it is still the most fundamental part. Like, we talk about aerodynamics all the time, and it's aerodynamics that adapt and change race by race. So it's a little bit more exciting to talk about aerodynamics week to week. But the fact is, the fundamentals behind it, the engine that is underneath, is so core to everything that happens in Formula One. You want to know what engine you are going to be using as soon as you possibly can. So why would Haas hesitate on that? Why would Haas say, we might go with Ferrari, we might go somewhere else? I think the only reason they might hesitate on that is because they've seen the Andretti project. As you say, Gene Haas is maybe getting a little bit annoyed by the fact that this Haas project isn't going the way that he thought it was going to, and therefore he's going to try and move in a direction that allows that Cadillac badge, Cadillac, Andretti, that kind of American motorsport to all come together. You can imagine Haas and Andretti and Cadillac all coming together to effectively form a team where Haas are still building the aerodynamic setup in terms of Haas have still got this infrastructure for building a Formula One car. Andretti have already got the infrastructure to be able to build the engines and put in the power unit to the car, and Cadillac help with Andretti in terms of that side of things. And then we kind of have this amalgamation American Formula One team. I could see it being a possibility. I'd like to announce myself as a Williams fan. Interesting. My suspicion is they fired him. I don't think he would have left on his own. I wonder how the technical director leaving as well fits into this. I agree with that. I think now that I've kind of sat down, had a think about it, and seen the timeline, the fact that we've talked about 2016 to now, and we've looked at that constructors standings, I think so too. I don't think Gunther Steiner would leave this project. I think he is too ingrained in the lifeblood of Haas. I think he is almost the heartbeat of that Haas Formula One team. But I think it leads them in a different direction from now onwards. Absolutely shocked by this news. I'm very, very shocked by this news. I am actually going to have a little look what the race has said about all of this, because I wonder if people are... I could be speaking absolute nonsense. And I completely respect... Like, there's probably people in the chat thinking, what on earth are you talking about? But I think we're all entitled to an opinion. And that's why I say this channel is all about the back and forth, the conversation. The reason that I love doing the live streams with you guys is because we do get to talk about this kind of stuff. And we do get to delve into the ins and outs of what's actually happening. Let's have a little look at this here. Can I move this over a touch? Not really. Can move it over that much. That much. Steiner Haas Haas Boss. Guenther Steiner bombshell exit from the Haas Formula One team. He has been the spearhead of the Haas Formula One team since their inception. Trackside engineer, CEO. Oh, this is very similar to the Formula One article. Let's have a look at the next one. Haas was Steiner's Formula One team. That's exactly what I said. Gunther Steiner was the public face of the Haas Formula One team. And actually, he represented Haas more than just on the track. You know what I mean? Like, no, sorry, not on the track. He represented Haas more than just on the Formula One weekends. He represented Haas all of the time in every single aspect. He was effectively the main character of Drive to Survive because he wanted to get that idea that Haas were a team you could get behind. He almost wanted to build the Haas brand as that underdog team that you look at in Drive to Survive and you decide to be a fan of because they give you so much more insight than all of the other Formula One teams. You know so much more about Haas because you got to see the behind the scenes of Gunther Steiner basically week in, week out doing everything that he was doing in the documentary. Like, he also put his heart and soul and put himself to bear in Drive to Survive to try and build up a fan base for this Haas Formula One team. Billionaire Gene Haas has the money. Steiner was the key to making the project happen. Exactly as I said before, already successful in NASCAR. That's also another thing. They are a very successful team in NASCAR, are Haas. And Gene will not be the kind of guy that expects to be in Formula One for what, 8 years now and have no wins, one pole position that was a little bit dodgy, no podiums, minimal top 5 finishes. You know, he's looking for something. You know, even you look at Alpine, they've got a win and a few podiums here and there. You look at AlphaTauri, obviously they had a win under the Toro Rosso name, but even more recently with Pierre Gasly, they've got wins and they pick up podiums every now and then. And Gasly even got a podium a couple of seasons ago, or even a season ago. You know, we're looking at the fact that these teams, even if you're a smaller team towards the rear end of the pack, generally you have something to go off of. I know Alfa Romeo, you could maybe say the other one, but before that, in the iteration of Sauber, they had podiums, they had things that you could get behind. And it just, yeah, for me, Gene Haas, I don't think would have expected it to be this bad in terms of where the Haas team were moving. As I said, with that trajectory, you think back, they were 5th in the constructor standings at one point. They were really looking like they were going to be the real deal, that kind of US Formula One team. The plans for Ferrari customer torpedoed when it became clear the rules would not allow this. Yeah. Listed parts. Okay, so they're again just kind of talking about 2018 finishing 5th in the standings, 4th fastest car. Sponsorship deal with Rich Energy. Rich Energy, man. Rich Energy killed Haas for so long. And then you think about, of course, COVID-19 pandemic, this kind of idea that actually once they were there, kind of goes backwards. Gunther Steiner's on there. Oh, yeah. Oops. He is quite literally the face of Haas, isn't he? In Formula One Manager 23, physical copies are now available. But he is now gone from there. What team do I support? I'm a McLaren fan. Also, the fact this happened so out of nowhere is just another sign that he probably got fired. And it wasn't totally his decision. Yeah, exactly. I feel like, there must have been some kind of decision from Gene. There must have been maybe a discussion between the two of them. Maybe they were, trying to plan this 2024 season, moving forwards. What can they do? And Gunther Steiner has kind of hit a little bit of a snag. Signs point to a sale soon. Also something that we touched upon. I feel like the Andretti sale is coming sooner rather than later, or at least a collaboration with Andretti, if not a full sale of the Formula One team to Andretti moving forwards. I think there are other brands that would also want to get involved. Colossal loss to the Haas brand. I think a majority of Haas fans were Haas fans because of Gunther Steiner. Like, you look at the drivers that they've had in recent seasons. Nico Hülkenberg maybe has a little bit of a fan base behind him because he has been in Formula One for so long. Kevin Magnussen, for me, isn't one of those drivers that has really got a huge following behind him, even though he's been in Formula One for a little while. Romain Grosjean was always a controversial character. You look at Nikita Mazepin, was a very controversial character. Like, Mick Schumacher maybe, but then also the way that he left Haas then would have lost a lot of fans for them in the Mick Schumacher camp. Yeah, for me, I think if you're a Haas fan, you're first and foremost a Gunther Steiner fan. I think that's kind of the way that it has been and will be for where the Gunther Steiner moves on to. Like, I think if Gunther Steiner ends up at the Audi team, I think there'll be a lot of fans that move over from Haas to Audi. Or if Gunther Steiner even takes a minimal role at another team moving forwards. I don't think he'll take the team principal role at Audi, but I could see him in a behind-the-scenes capacity. But yeah, I think if you know Formula One, barely knows anything about Formula One, recognizes Gunther Steiner's name. Otter exists, has literally put it perfectly. I couldn't have put it perfectly myself. Like, he is such a face of the sport at this point. And I feel like, is top 3 in terms of recognizable team principles. That's why he's on the F1 manager, right? I feel like more people know Gunther Steiner than even like Franz Tost. And Franz Tost had been on the grid for 20 plus years. Obviously, he's gone now. But I feel like more people would have known Gunther Steiner than Franz Tost as just a general Formula One fan, even though Franz Tost had the longevity over him. What else have they said? Haas is an F1 team drifting. I agree with that. They don't really have any real direction. They don't seem to be able to understand the car. They don't seem to be able to develop the car in any way. You know, you look at the development program that they had in place, it just hasn't been able to move forwards in terms of 2022 to now. I feel like the car has just regressed. They still haven't been able to solve the problem with the aero and tire degradation that they've had. Yeah, it's not been great. Maybe a sporting director in Audi. I could see that. I could see a behind the scenes kind of role for him in Audi, however that may suit him. Let's be honest, results weren't good enough either. Team principal or drivers get fired. That's very true. They are stuck with the drivers that they have. And if you actually look at it, the drivers that they have right now can deliver. You know, the drivers that they have right now, Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg, are exceptional talents. Like, they are very, very good drivers. Okay, they're not Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso levels. They're never going to reach world championships. And, you know, you'd be lucky to... Well, Kevin Magnussen does have a podium to his name from his debut, but you'd be lucky to see either of those drivers on the podium. But they've been around Formula One for long enough to justify their position on the Formula One grid. Kevin Magnussen in particular, I think, has a big 2024 ahead of him. I don't know if this is going to help or hinder him, because Kevin Magnussen has kind of been like Gunther Steiner's son throughout like the Haas project that they have had. Considering they haven't signed with Ferrari, perhaps this means Mercedes switch. Yeah, to get Mick Schumacher back in with Andretti. I could see it being... I don't know, actually, because the problem is if Andretti can only get their engines approved for 2028 rather than 2026, they're in a kind of limbo right now, right? So similar to what Sauber are going through, they've got 2 years until Audi comes in, but post Alfa Romeo. So Sauber are also in this kind of window of nothingness, this 2 years of nothingness. We could almost end up seeing Haas in a 4 years of nothing. Well, I feel like they'll still try and make as much progress as they possibly can up until 2026, but we could see at the start of the 2026 cycle, Haas almost be in a 2-year limbo between 2026 and 2028 when that Andretti engine can finally come in, unless they can swish the Andretti deal back a couple of years, and maybe Andretti can get their engine in for the 2026 season. Because then we've also got a huge regulation change in 2030. So we're kind of going through 4-year cycles in Formula One now, where the regulations do change quite dramatically every 4 seasons. And 2026 to 2030, if you're coming in midway through that, does Haas then end up actually in a bit of a weird purgatory situation up until 2030, where 2030 is the real opportunity for them to jump up the Formula One grid again? And then you're looking at like a 6-year wait from this season until we see the Haas that maybe is, you know, the destined Haas that we will see in the future. And so much can change in that time. Here we go. Time to sell up to Andretti, as we've been touching upon. So yeah, the race are going for a very similar... Oh, sorry, the race are going for a very similar process as to what we were saying and what we were kind of breaking into. This won't help entertain newfound fans. That's very true. I wonder how many people watched Drive to Survive and then watched Formula One purely and simply because of Gunther Steiner. It's a very charismatic character in Drive to Survive. There's a reason that he had effectively 2 or 3 episodes to himself. Like, obviously for him, he was trying to sell that Haas brand. But then secondarily, poses serious questions about the Formula One teams. The disagreement behind Steiner's shock Haas split. It's unthinkable to imagine Haas without Steiner. The team bears the name of its owner, Gene Haas. Really was Steiner F1, as I said. Discontent bubbling away for some time now in this situation. There were frustrations with the way Haas was run from the very top. Gene Haas seemingly become more apathetic towards its own Formula One team and refused to invest in it significantly beyond what he already has. Steiner and Haas disagreed on the team's potential in its current form, with a limited UK base in Branbury, a technical facility in Maranello where Haas has critical alliance with Ferrari and barely used excellent headquarters in the United States. With Steiner felt Haas needed steady investment over the next few years. It had outgrown its unique multi-location, Ferrari-dependent model. Haas believes the team... Yeah, so, okay, actually, looking at this from that perspective is maybe saying... Maybe Gene... Again, this points towards an Andretti Cadillac deal for me. Gene was thinking that it was going to be more of a United States-based team. The argument for the Maranello... There's two arguments to sticking in Maranello. One, they are Ferrari powered, and they took a lot of staff from Ferrari over the course of COVID, because you got to remember, when the cost cap came in and COVID came in, Ferrari had to cut their staff quite considerably, because Ferrari were way above the cost cap in terms of what they were spending every year. And actually, a lot of the engineers from Ferrari ended up moving over to Haas, because they were both based in Maranello, and Haas were able to open up a facility, literally effectively on Ferrari's ground, where the Ferrari engineers could still work in the same place, effectively work in the same building, but instead of a Ferrari badge on the door, there was now a Haas badge on the door. So that was the kind of idea there for Haas. They were able to get these incredible engineers from Ferrari without having to try and convince them to move to the United States or the UK. Alongside that, the majority of Formula One races are still in Europe. But if we look at how the Formula One calendar is going, and you look at the 24 races that we've got for this season, actually, the Formula One calendar is slowly moving away from being just a European-centric thing. Like, if you look back at the calendar 20 years ago, there were a lot of races in Europe. We are slowly moving away from that. You know, you look at Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and you look at all the races that have been added, actually, I should say, recently. So you look at Saudi Arabia is fairly new. China is still waiting to come back onto the Formula One calendar. Miami is new. You know, Italy's been around forever. Monaco's been around forever. Spain's been around. Austria, Great Britain, Hungary, Belgium, Netherlands. These are all been around for ages. Singapore. Then you've got the United States Grand Prix, which has already been there. But then the US Grand Prix in Las Vegas. Then you've got Qatar that's been added recently. If you look at all of the races that are being added, they are moving away from that kind of European-centric idea. And maybe a team based in America isn't so silly anymore when we've got 1, 2, 3, Canada, Brazil. You know, you're looking at 5, 6 races. So what? Canada, 3 in the US, Mexico, Brazil. You're looking at 6 races that are based in Northern or Southern America. So you're looking at a quarter of the calendar, and then you're looking at Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Japan, China, Qatar. So you're looking at half of the races this year are actually outside of Europe. And therefore, having a European-based team maybe isn't the huge advantage that it used to be, right? The reason that you'd base yourself in Europe is because if you ever wanted to do any upgrades, it was easier. It was more straightforward. There's a reason that everybody brings their big upgrade package to Spain. I don't think it would be Spain this time around because it's a little bit too late in the season. I feel like everyone's probably going to bring their big upgrade package to Imola this time around because it's the first race in Europe. It's that first opportunity to do a massive overhaul of your car without having to deliver hundreds of parts across thousands of miles. If you're Ferrari and you've got a massive upgrade package, moving it from Maranello to Imola is way easier than moving it from Maranello to Australia. You know, like, you've got to understand the perspective from that as well. So maybe Gene Haas did want an American-based Formula One team, now understands that over or half and soon to be over half the calendar, because let's face it, if another race is added to the Formula One calendar, it's probably not going to be European. I can't see France coming back anytime soon. I can't see Germany coming back anytime soon. But We always talk about, whether India might come back. There's Malaysia that could also come back onto the Formula One calendar. But then there's also massive countries. There's the ability for, there was a possibility of an Argentinian Grand Prix. There's another US race that could possibly happen, of course. Yeah, so Maria's just said another race in the US. We could be leaning towards, for probably the first time in Formula One history, a calendar that is more outside of Europe than inside of Europe. So Gene Haas might not have a terrible idea in that case to move the Formula One team out of being this European-centric thing, Instead of having aero done in Maranello, technical regulations done in the UK, and then also a factory in the US, let's just move all three of those things to the US. Let's have Andretti, who are doing the power unit. Let's have Haas, who are still doing a lot of the aero work. Maybe you can convince some of the Ferrari guys to come over to the US for a little while to set up, or at least get them sorted. A little bit like what Red Bull have done with Honda. They convinced a lot of the Honda engineers to come over to Red Bull powertrains and at least set the foundation for Red Bull powertrains moving forwards. Doesn't surprise me that they want to do that. And then finally, the race have said, okay, just kind of looking into the new Haas Formula One boss. But as I said, he is a very well-respected member of the grid, has been there for 20 years, got his start in Formula One in 2003, has been with Haas since their inception. So it more than makes sense that he was the man to take over from Guenther Steiner. Oh, it is exciting, though, isn't it? It's going to be so different. It's going to be very, very strange to see the Formula One grid without Gunther Steiner. It's going to be very strange to see the direction that Haas decide to take this in moving forwards. But I think we've covered everything in its entirety. We talked about the fact that maybe this is an Andretti deal in disguise. Maybe this is the end of the Haas Formula One team. I imagine Gunther Steiner was probably fired as opposed to leaving. I imagine they were looking at the results and the fact that 2018 was the real peak of Haas Formula One. We've had 5 years since then. 5 years since 2018. It hasn't looked any better. I know you can kind of say 2019, 2021, you can kind of give them a bye for. But if you look at that comparison, for me, Gunther Steiner, it was probably the right time to go. But I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you excited to see the future of Haas? Could you see the Andretti deal coming through? What happens to Gunther Steiner in the future? Thank you so much for joining me and watching. Thanks to everyone who put in comments as we were going along. I absolutely love these discussions. We should do more live streams. This is what I've basically realized over the course of this 45-minute chat that we've had. We should do way more live streams, even if it is just random little bits and pieces, because I just absolutely love it. If you are new to the channel, subscribe. Of course, we will be live for qualifying and all of the races over the course of the season, all of the sprint races as well. I'm even going to be trying to be live for some of the testing sessions this year too. And we've got car reveals coming soon. We're going to try and be live for the car reveals. Basically, if you're not subscribed, you should be, because there's so much Formula One content coming your way. And we've got an incredible community of incredibly knowledgeable people who have been pointing me in the right direction in the chat over the course of this video. Thank you so much. I will see you very, very soon. In fact, video coming out this weekend. Possibly, yeah, video coming out this weekend. That's all I'll say.